This is another in our series of films tracing the heritage of 15th Air Force. It has been said that those who fail to learn from the mistakes of the past are doomed to repeat them. And thus it is important to study the past, thereby to avoid similar failures. Perhaps so. But I prefer to believe that we who seek progress can learn even more from the success of those who have gone before.
For over 45 years during the Cold War, an all-encompassing military machine controlled America's nuclear weapons. Some 250,000 people strong, the Strategic Air Command was known by its acronym, SAC. The men and women of the command did not make foreign policy, but trained to be its ultimate enforcer. They did not build the weapons, but masterminded how they were deployed and where they would strike. They did not defend the country, but by their sheer strength deterred the enemy from attack.
It was a proud command, but it was a disciplined command with a heavy boot. And discipline was the name of the game. And I'm glad, because it needed to be disciplined. It was dealing with things that were so important and so critical. You couldn't make a mistake.
The heart of the United States nuclear forces was a triad of military might. SAC bombers and refueling aircraft made up the first prong of the attack. SAC intercontinental ballistic missiles located throughout the U.S. were another system ready at a moment's notice to decimate enemy targets. While the Navy's nuclear missile-bearing submarines were the third and final sea-based arm of the U.S. offensive. Reconnaissance air and spacecraft, as well as mobile command centers, rounded out SAC's capability. At its height, the Strategic Air Command controlled over 3,000 aircraft, thousands of missiles, and tens of thousands of nuclear weapons. The command's emblem was a raised armored fist holding both olive branch and lightning bolts. SAC's message was clear: peace through absolute strength. During the Cold War, that strength hinged on the military men and women of the command, rationally facing the unthinkable.
I can't imagine any more challenging career than preparing, training, working as hard as you could to do a job that you hoped you never, ever had the opportunity to do. How do you wake up in the morning and bounce your 3-year-old daughter on your knee, kiss her goodbye, go to work, and realize that if you do what you're trained for, she may not be there when you get home.
With the ironic motto, "Peace is our profession," the United States Strategic Air Command was a military giant.
It's probably as an effective a military enterprise, if you will, that the world has ever known. It operated automatically, meticulously. Nothing's ever error-free in the military, but it really was an awesome force.
So horrible were the consequences of using these weapons that military leaders and politicians alike focused on their ability to stop a war before it started.
Deterrence in its simplest form means that I have a certain set of capabilities that will be so devastating to you that you won't take actions that force me to use it. You won't attack me, for example. You won't attack my allies.
15th Air Force Commanders, Cold War, 1949-1991. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Sun Tzu. In the early years of the Cold War, America's first line of defense, the Strategic Air Command, assumed control of the veteran 15th Air Force. Headquartered at March Field, the 15th quickly became one of the most powerful air armadas in aviation history, its men and women forming an impenetrable barrier committed to protecting the people of the United States. With nuclear war never more than an international crisis away, the handful of men selected to command held in their capable hands a military power greater than that of all the wars in human history combined. Experienced and disciplined, each had been personally hardened by the rigors of combat. On battlefronts from World War II to Korea and Vietnam, they learned firsthand the lessons of war and the burdens of command. Major General Emmett O'Donnell, Jr., 1948-1953. Major General Walter C. Sweeney, Jr., 1953-1955. Major General Archie J. Old, Jr., 1955-1965. Lieutenant General William K. Martin, 1965-1968. General Jack J. Catton, 1968-1969. General Paul K. Carleton, 1969-1972. General William F. Pitts, 1972-1975. Lieutenant General Brian M. Schatz, 1975-1978. General James P. Mullins, 1978-1981. Lieutenant General John J. Murphy, 1981-1983. Lieutenant General James E. Light, Jr., 1983-1988. Lieutenant General Richard A. Burpee, 1988-1989. Major General John R. Farrington, 1989-1990. Lieutenant General Robert D. Beckel, 1990-1992.
Following World War II, 15th Air Force became the cornerstone of the newly established Strategic Air Command. The B-29 Superfortress, wartime mainstay of Air Force operations in the Pacific, took over as our dominant weapon. Then, projecting the global scope of American air power became a primary objective. Long-range missions and goodwill flights overseas demonstrated our global capability. By 1948, overseas rotation became a fact of life, with some air crews and support personnel on rotation at all times. In 1951, the last piston-engine bomber, the giant B-36, joined 15th Air Force. Among its 10 engines were 4 jet power plants, a sign of transition. But aerial refueling remained dormant during World War II, not to emerge as an operational reality until 1948. 15th Air Force received its first tanker authorizations in 1949. B-29 bombers converted to KB-29 tankers. On March 2nd, 1949, the Lucky Lady II, a B-50A from Carswell Air Force Base, Texas, completed the first non-stop around-the-world flight, covering 23,452 miles in 94 hours, 1 minute. The flight featured 4 air refuelings by KB-29M tankers, using the British-developed gravity hose system. Later models adopted the now familiar boom as the standard technique, and tankers were assured a permanent role co-equal with their bomber partners. While tankers made possible global operations by 15th Air Force, strategic bombing was again called forth with the advent of war in Korea in June 1950. 15th Air Force B-29s flew to the Far East within the first month of the North Korean invasion. The bombers soon destroyed the few suitable targets in North Korea. For the remainder of the war, bombardment's role was one of the interdiction and destruction of related tactical targets. As the action in Korea wound down, SAC started its conversion to an all-jet bomber force. KC-97 tankers, fast enough to refuel the new 6-jet B-47 bombers, replaced the older KB-29s and KB-50s. In 1955, the first 15th Air Force B-52s arrived at Castle Air Force Base, joining their B-47 cousins. The KC-135 tanker followed soon after, introducing the ability to refuel jet bombers at normal operating speed and altitude. In 1957, 3 B-52s led by 15th Air Force Commander Major General Archie J. Old, Jr. flew non-stop around the world in 45 hours and 19 minutes. They were air refueled 5 times during the mission.